In this lesson, we're going to look at explanations and the features of that type of text. Before we explore the features of that text type, we need to think about the purpose of that text. Why do we have that kind of text? So the purpose of an explanation is to inform, not to persuade or entertain, but to inform. It's to explain how things work and why things happen, and to explain the sequence or cause and effect of an event based on facts. So it's always supported by facts, why something happens or how something works based on the evidence. There are a few different examples of this type of text. We can get a sequential explanation where you detail the stages in an event. For example, in a life cycle diagram, you explain how something grows and changes. There's a causal explanation which details what causes the change from one stage to the next. So, for example, how digestion occurs in the body. And consequential, which is explaining the effects and outcomes of a process. So, for example, in science, we might explain why salt crystals form on a string after an experiment. That's a consequence of that experiment. And that's what we're sort of focusing on this time. So the first feature of an explanation text we'll look at is that it answers the questions how and why. So any explanation text should be answering the questions how and why. How does an iPad work? Why do things float and sink? Those sorts of things. Another feature of an explanation text is that it has a clear title. It might also have subheadings if it is a long explanation, or if you want to separate the parts of a sequential sort of explanation or parts of a process. For example, your title could be Recycling Cans and Plastics, or The Life Cycle of a Frog, or How Earthquakes Occur. So these are all titles that clearly tell you what the explanation is going to be about. Ideas are grouped in paragraphs, so you do need to write in not just sentences but paragraphs. Each paragraph includes a topic sentence, a supporting sentence, or possibly more than one, with evidence and further description to expand on the main topic of your paragraph, and then a concluding or leading sentence. So if you're finishing off that section of your explanation, you just conclude, sum up what you've said in that paragraph. If you're still continuing to another paragraph with more information within that section, you need the last sentence of the first paragraph should sort of lead into the next one in a linking or leading sentence. Your first paragraph will introduce the subject. And there are at least 3 sentences in a paragraph. It's really important to remember that. If you write 2 sentences, even if they're long sentences, that's not a paragraph, because you couldn't possibly have a topic sentence, supporting sentences, and a concluding sentence without having at least 3. So you do need at least 3 sentences in a paragraph. The fourth feature of an explanation is that you use specific language. There's specific types of language that you use within an explanation. So there's the cause and effect language, things like then or as a result, so, if, because, therefore. All of those words suggest that what you're about to say next is connected to the first thing you said by like a causal link. So this happened, then this happened, or as a result of something happening, something else happened. So it uses that kind of language in an explanation. There's time and ordering language, not always, but certainly for describing a process. First, then, next, after, finally, that sort of language. And when we explain something, we're talking in the present tense because we are explaining how something is now. If it's explaining how something was, like a historical explanation, that's a bit different. But generally, when we explain how something works, like the life cycle of a frog, we're explaining how it is, not how it was or how it will be, how it is. So they are like this. The cog turns clockwise, or when that happens, this happens. So it's talking about things happening as if they're happening now. That's the present tense. And the fifth feature of an explanation, images and diagrams. So usually there are photographs or labelled and drawn diagrams. All Google Images have captions, so text beneath the image to say what it is. It's not just a picture put in there to make the page look pretty. It's there for a purpose. Your images and your diagrams directly relate to the text and should be positioned either beneath or beside the text that they relate to. So not just on just decorating your page because you'd like it to look pretty, but every image should be purposefully chosen, should be informative, should be captioned to clearly show what it's about or what you want your audience to focus on when they look at the image, and should directly relate to the text about next to it. So if you're describing how the cogs, for example, how the cogs work in a clock, and you've got a picture of a car next to that doesn't make sense to your reader. You might be describing how the cogs and the mechanics work in the clock, but then have a picture of a whole clock or a digital watch. And again, even though it's within the same topic, it's not the best place for that picture. So you need to think about how you choose pictures and diagrams and where you put them in an explanation, because the point is to give information to your reader and make them understand that process that you're explaining. So to review, in this lesson we learnt about the purpose of explanations, examples of different types of explanations or different ways that they're used, and the common features of explanations.